Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The show is about to begin.
Hey, what's going on? This is Truth Live Shenanigans Podcast. Yes, we're streaming all over the world today at TLSLiveShow. We're now weekly, every Sunday at this time. My name is Neil Nix, and today we have a great show planned for you, all hot topics today. The Z wants to talk about the creepy Duggars. One of them was arrested for child porn. Yanni noticed a growing segregation in millennial wealth. Robbie is talking about the consequences for COVID parties. And I'm talking about Republicans not wanting Black history to be taught in school. A quick fire will be Mitt Romney, and Shenanigans Game Show will be celebrating Asian and Pacific Islander Month with Shenanigans Trivia. All right, now before we get into the show, I've got to introduce you to my amazing hosts. Miss Lizzie Enders, our English professor, editor, journalist, and sports savant out of Washington, D.C.
What's up, everyone? Happy Sunday. Hope everyone is doing well. Beautiful weather here in the nation's capital the past 2 days. Beautiful weather. Hopefully the weather is nice and getting a little bit warmer where you are. I need just one more week. If you guys can just burn some sage for me for just one more week. This is my last week of hell. Grades are due on Thursday. I have a syllabus for the New York Times due on Wednesday. I have a job interview on Tuesday. So if you guys can just get me through all of this week, I think I'll be good.
This Z is a busy woman. Busy one.
Very.
These bills, gotta buy all this Chanel.
All right, now rock star with the rock band Fallen Machine. Coming to you from Sudbury, Ontario, Mr. Rob B. Rock.
What's up, everyone? Happy Sunday Fun Day. Woo, woo. Love it. So, Liz, I will burn some sage for you, but from a reasonable distance. I would request that any neighbors on your floor not burn any sage or anything that may smell like sage at any point in time soon. Just saying.
So he's referring to my neighbors. I live in a no-smoking, non-smoking, smoke-free building, and my neighbors lighten it up with the ganja on Thursday, Friday. Being vivid and about to beat some ass. It is so rude and disgusting. You signed a lease. You signed an agreement that you would not smoke in the building. My entire apartment reeked. The elevator reeked. The floor reeked. I think my cat Remy was high. Like, it was a complete mess. It was a complete mess. So thank you, Rob. I appreciate that.
All right, and coming to you from Atlanta, Georgia, our youthful college student, model, actress, and co-host of TLS Unscripted, Miss Gianni Storm.
Hello, guys. Happy Sunday Fun Day. I'm excited to start doing the weekly Unscripted with Olivia on Wednesdays. That's going to be interesting. It's going to be an entirely new day, and I hope you guys tune in on Wednesday. But other than that, pray for me too. This is my last couple of weeks in the semester. I've been deciding if I should take summer classes. My savings are saying I don't know, so we'll see. We'll see how things go.
Take that week off. Take that month, that couple of months off.
Yeah. I think if you don't have to, get some rest.
Take a break.
Yeah,
you're right.
School can be tough.
You're right.
Plus, you have a bunch of other projects going on. I would focus, if you can afford not to be in classes this summer, I would focus on all of the other projects you got going on. Miss Hazel Valentine maybe needs some time. So
that's true.
Great.
Hazel Valentine.
Just so you can catch a breather. I know, because I also too am in teaching and you are a student. It's been a rough semester. semester. So if you can, get some rest, girl. Get some rest.
I second that. Second that emotion. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Let's get started with our quick fire question. All right. Utah Senator Mitt Romney, the Republican senator that voted to impeach Trump both times, was booed this past week by state delegates and called a traitor and communist while giving a speech. Mitt Romney hit back with "Boo all you like." Aren't you embarrassed? So let me ask you, what would you have said if you were up there getting booed for standing up to Trump? Start with Lizzie. What would you have said?
State of Utah, I would have been like, okay, calm down, polygamists. Calm down, polygamists.
Robbie Rock.
Like, boo yourselves for supporting a fascist, racist, lying traitor for 4 years. The GOP, nay, America, deserves better from you.
Gianni?
I said what I said, and I'll say it again.
All right.
Ooh, I said what I said.
Now, I'm not sure what I would have said, but I think, knowing me, I might have slipped up with an accidental "fuck Trump." But that's just me. That's just me. I feel like I would have
accidental.
Accidental. It would, yeah. All right. There was also a recent attempt to censor him, though, by Republicans. It failed. But I'm curious, do you guys think his political career is in the dumps for being the only Republican to consistently stand up to Trump?
I mean, maybe in Utah, but I still think, he might have a run for president still, available to him in the future. It just shows the hypocrisy of, the citizens of Utah, the constituents in Utah. You guys are hyped and pissed over Romney voting for Trump to be impeached. You guys are also the state that is probably one of the most religious in this country. Mormonism, screams throughout the entire state of Utah. Yet you are now backing a former president who openly, publicly talked about grabbing women by the pussy, who cheated on his first wife with the second wife with the third, who now we know was having sexual relations with a porn star. Yeah, okay. Hypocrisy all around. Hypocrisy. What would the Mormon faith do? What would the Mormon faith do?
I don't know. I don't want to talk about the Mormon faith, but I don't know.
That's a whole episode, man.
There's a little shadiness going on over there too. I'm gonna just leave it at that.
I don't think his career is over. I think honestly, there's more people that don't like Trump than there are people that do in the country, really everywhere. But so I don't see his career going down. I still feel like people support Romney.
Yeah, well, I also think that, particularly amongst the sycophants of the Republican Party, because the Republican Party is now two very extremes. They're very divided amongst themselves. So I think amongst the more moderates, they would be supporting Romney as much as possible because that's the type of voice that they need leading the party, not what they had for the last 4 years. And it's going to be a while before they can undo all the damage that rhetoric did because it galvanized a lot of supporters behind the party underneath that shitty banner.
Yeah.
It always amazes me too that Republicans, they rally behind Donald Trump so much, and they're quick to call out someone like Romney. They're quick to call out John McCain as a rhino, i.e., Republican in name only. When Donald Trump was a registered Democrat at one point. Donald Trump gave to the Democratic Party. Donald Trump was a friend of the Clintons, was an advocate, supporter of Bill Clinton when he was going through all of his I did not have sex with that sexual relations with that woman controversy, probably because Donald Trump was in a similar controversy. But he was a Democrat at that time. So if anyone has flipped and flopped back and forth between parties, it's been Donald Trump. The only reason why he, turned his back on the Clintons was because they didn't invite him to Chelsea's wedding. That's when he got pissed. That's when he decided, okay,
he's such a whiner, man.
Liberal Democrats anymore. I'm going to creep back over to the Republicans where I tend to be appreciated. So they're just hypocrites. They're hypocrites, 100%.
Yep. All right. If you've never been to TLS before, let me tell you a bit about us. Our hosts and our guests share their truths and opinions with you, call out those lies, and point out any of those ridiculous shenanigans going on, like this whole Romney deal. And on our show, we always try to have some fun with shenanigans of our own. You can join in the conversation live every Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern, or download the podcast for free anytime on Apple Podcasts and listen or listen to wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, guys, let's go ahead and jump right on into our hot topic.
Truth, lies, shenanigans.
All right, Lizzie. Let's see. Lizzie, you have an interesting topic on the Duggars. Duggars. Tell us, is this truth, lies, or shenanigans?
This is truth and shenanigans. The shenanigans to the point where mofo needs to be underneath the jail at this point. Underneath the jail at this point. So the eldest member of the 19 and counting Duggar clan, Josh Duggar, was arrested on Thursday by Homeland Security and indicted on 2 counts of child pornography, possessing and distributing child pornography. This is after it became public. In 2015, it became public that when he was between the ages of 14 and 16 years old, he molested at least 5 underage girls. 4 of the 5 were his sisters. The 5th girl was a young lady that belonged to their church. So he molested them. He apologized for doing something bad. But then right after that story came out, also in 2015, it became apparent that he was a member of Ashley Madison, the Ashley Madison website. Ashley Madison website was set up for people who are married and wanted to cheat on the down low. And so he admitted that he was on Ashley Madison website, but also at that time he admitted that he was addicted to porn. So when he was arrested on Thursday on these child pornography charges, it came 2 days after his wife, Anna Duggar, was on Instagram announcing that she is pregnant with their 7th child. So my question to the panel is, what we gonna do with Josh Duggar? What we gonna do with Josh Duggar?
I want to hear from Gianni first. What do you think, Gianni?
Because there were some details that Liz was spilling that I was like, I didn't know that I saw the molestation charges were, but not to his sister, so incest.
Yeah, I remember that.
That's a lot to unpack. So he's addicted to porn. He
was never arrested. He's never served any jail time, except for now. He's been in jail since Thursday. But before that, no jail time, no arrest, nothing.
And that's what the biggest red flag, well, not even red flag, that's what I took out of all of this. I was like, wow, nobody's ever held him accountable. Like nobody's ever charged him for anything. I don't know. I don't know what we're going to do with him. I think that I'm interested to see how this child porn case goes because yikes. But I don't know. And then I saw his wife. She's still very supportive of him. She mentions that they're still going through things. So it's like, I don't know. It's scaring me.
They're like
it's creepy.
They're like a cult almost.
It's very strange.
I mean,
yeah.
How many kids are we talking? Did his mother have?
Counting.
From the parents, from Josh's parents, 19 kids. But not just 19 pregnancies. That she's been pregnant more times than that. Unfortunately, had some miscarriages. But 19 kids. The interesting thing is that the older ones now are getting married, and they're basically separating themselves from the parents, especially the older girls who are getting married. Separating themselves from the parents. A couple of them have had no contact with the parents over the past couple of years. So there's a lot going on in this family. Rob, what you got to say? What are we gonna do with Josh?
Well, I know that he's currently out, but under condition that he is not to be around minors. So that means he can't be around his kids. It's messed up. It's messed up. I mean, 19 kids and counting. It's like, why do you keep wrecking that vagina? It's
okay.
At some point you have to stop because you clearly don't have the time available to make sure that your kids get some of the proper direction that they need along the way. Josh is responsible for his own actions, It's slimy, it's gross, it's disgusting. It isn't the least bit surprising, though, coming out of a fundamentalist family that is seeking the limelight, because they typically have the most skeletons in their closet, or when they do come out, they're usually pretty big skeletons. And this is definitely the case with Duggar family. I feel awful for his wife. I feel awful for his children. I pray that his children are untouched. I hope that he's
That's what
only
I
found
was
digital
thinking too.
material and he hasn't acted upon anything in the physical world. But unfortunately, acting digitally does force physical interaction at some point. If there was no one seeking the content wouldn't be generated. So he's a big part of the problem, and he needs to be dealt with accordingly.
So before Neo speaks, let me just say something about the content. So it's alleged that he downloaded and possessed material that included sexual child abuse of children under the age of 12. Under the
Yeah.
age of 12. Neo?
Well, I've said it 100 times. You know how I feel about kids and um, people hurting children and sexual assaulting children. It's not. As a matter of fact, I was. It's funny. I was watching *Handmaid's Tale*. Handmaid. I don't know if any of you guys watch *Handmaid's Tale*, but that show is like by far the best show on TV. I mean, because with the dialogue and the writing and the stories. But anyway, one of the most recent episodes included a discussion on um, abuse of children. And I don't usually like with movies. I rarely get emotional, but when I get emotional, it's usually about kids, right? And so when I hear someone talk, abusing children, I mean, I get angry, um, and I think he needs to rot in jail. I mean, rot in jail. But I've told you all before. Also, I'm good with bringing corporal punishment back for certain crimes, such as this, such as abuse of children, um, because I don't think just rotting in jail is enough to learn a proper lesson. I think some people need 40 lashes. You know, I just think
There's. Do you
I
feel
think a
there's no
Historically,
public
remorse
though,
for
those
people?
I think a public 40
Sorry.
lashes, not something behind the scenes, but public humiliation, like Cersei on Game of Thrones. Like, we need to see it. We need to see your humiliation. We need to see you at your lowest point for violating not only your sisters, not only little kids in the church, but now getting off on watching other little kids
being
be
abused.
violent. Yeah, yeah.
Like I say, I mean, I know corporal punishment has a horrible history simply because of the way it was implemented. Obviously, because people are of course, corporal punishment was used on slaves often, and then there are some countries that use it inappropriately currently. Um, but I'm okay with certain situations that being all right. I mean, I just am. I just am. And like I
I
say,
think
Duggar,
what
I'd love to
bothers
see him get his 40 laps.
I think what bothers me the most at this point, we're in 2021. His initial molestation accusations came in the mid 2000s. So we're talking like 2004, 2005.
Mm-hmm.
It was 2006. It came out, it came to light in 2015. We're now in 2021, and he has yet to be disciplined. He has yet to be charged with anything. He has yet to be
Exactly.
punished.
And
When
that's
it
the big
came
problem.
out that he had been molesting his sisters. I think the youngest sister at that time was 4. When that came out, his parents sent him away to work on like their farm or something. He was never arrested. He never got any counseling. He never went to jail. There were no repercussions. And so we have now a situation where, and I'm not saying this to say that I feel sorry for Josh, because quite honestly, I'm like Neo. I think he should be like, oh, Yella. He needs to be put down. But
Oh, you
we
talking
have
about
a
put down?
situation. You said corporal punishment. I mean, yeah,
You said put down. I ain't say killing.
put down, put down like, oh, put down like, oh, yeah. But we have a situation where this young man, it was apparent to his family in his teens that he had a problem, and it wasn't
They knew it.
Address.
that
Yeah.
allowed it to manifest. That allowed him
Yep.
to continue unchecked. And Rob talked about the family dynamic in which there were 19 kids and counting. So my dad, was the second youngest boy of 10 children. And my aunt, my godmother, she used to talk about all the time. She was the second oldest girl. I was named after the oldest girl, Elizabeth Eleanor. She was the second oldest girl. And she talked about how growing up, she resented her mother so much because she kept having children, but wasn't taking care of them. The responsibility for taking care of the children was left to the other kids. And that was the same situation with the Duggars. She would come home after having a baby, and then all the other kids had to take care of the baby, and then she would just go frolic with the husband and then get pregnant again. And so that's creating a situation of not taking responsibility for your actions from the parents on down to the children. And unfortunately, the cycle probably is now with some of the grandchildren. Like Rob said, I hope he did not touch any of his children. I really do, because they're still fairly young. They're under the age of 10. Like it's disgusting what has happened. But yeah, I think he needs to be taken out in the shed like Yella and put down. There's no, at this point, he's in his 30s, there's no rehabilitation. There's no rehabilitation
Yeah.
I agree with you on that. It
at all.
probably can't be rehabilitated. Kevin Thaxton says if he gets put down, we can save tax dollars.
I mean, DC, we pay all this money in taxes and we not even a state. I'm all for it.
Oh yeah,
I'm all
that's a whole nother topic. All
Mhm.
right, Chapman Robinson says his vile parents put the onus on their daughters to publicly forgive Josh.
Mhm.
That was
That was
ridiculous.
another thing. They were pressured into giving statements into which they were like, we have moved on. We've moved past it. Well, let me tell you, I have not moved past some of the horrors of abuse in my childhood.
Mhm.
So I would not, and that could be one of the reasons why they are now removing themselves from the family dynamic, because there are at least two of the older daughters who have nothing to do with the parents anymore. So
Mike Winter says child molesters get the worst beatings in jail. Oh, that's true. That's true. They do. They do actually. So kind of
Yeah,
like
well, that's what I was saying. Historically, people who harm children do not fare well in prison.
yeah.
They don't.
I didn't say immediate execution. Like, he could stay in jail and take his whooping for several years. But at some point, you
Ruthless.
gotta put the rabid dog down. You gotta put the rabid dog down. And so, I think Rob mentioned this as well. Like, is he out on bail now? I'm not sure if he's out now.
I believe
If
he is out on bail right now, and that's what one of the conditions was, that he's not to be in the presence of minors.
can't be around his own children even. Can't even be around his own children now.
Good.
Here's a question for you guys from Jacqueline Robinson. Twitterverse has been busy all weekend tweeting pictures of this child molesting troll with various prominent Republicans: Huckabee, Cruz, Rubio, Pence. What do you guys say to that?
I'm not
He's
surprised.
a fundamentalist Christian that speaks to their power base, and he's in the media. So, of course, they've got a bunch of photo ops with him. It's not reflective of any systemic
Like
child
saying,
molestation happening within the Republicans, but he's someone who spoke well to their voter base. He
I
absolutely
don't know,
spoke well.
Rob. It
I
might
feel like
be.
like
I don't
attracts
know.
like.
Like people
Don't-
tend to
I-
stick together. All I'm saying.
Pedophiles of a feather, of a feather.
I don't know. I'm not going to outright say that Republicans tend to be pedophiles, but
Pedophiles of a feather, touch
God.
kids together.
Pedophiles
just
of a feather.
just saying. I
Wow.
know
Oh my God.
like people tend to, and like people tend to protect each other. Like Kyle Rittenhouse, for example.
They
Yes.
tend to be the ones that are protecting these people,
Yep.
that are not speaking out. Look at Matt Getz. How do you say his name? Gates or Getz? I think it's Getz.
Getz.
Down in Florida. So it's coming out now. So now his own boy, came out and wrote a letter Now, granted, he wrote a letter, to try to get some type of leniency when he was being charged for something. But he wrote a letter implicating Matt Getz in paying for sex with a 17-year-old. When these charges first came out, the Republicans came out in droves defending him. Instead of saying, okay, let's take a look at this. Nope, defending him. And again, these are the same Republicans who are still defending, grab him by the pussy Trump.
Yeah.
Grab him by the pussy.
Yeah, I think you're about to say something, right?
No, I don't remember now.
That's all right.
I don't remember.
I'm sorry, I got caught laughing because Hot Wheelin's back. So he says, I ain't messing with that lovely lady. She crazy.
Who?
I don't know, but it just made me laugh. All right, Kevin Thaxton, Republicans aren't true Christians. The fundamentals of Christianity don't coincide perfectly with Republicanism. Good comment. All right, let's move on to our next hot topic.
Truth, lies, shenanigans.
All right, so we got next up is Rob B. Rob B, you've got some interesting things to talk about in Canada with COVID parties. Rob B, is this truth, lies, or shenanigans?
Some truth and shenanigans, absolutely all mixed into it. Canada hasn't been doing as well during the second wave as we did at the onset as far as containing it, and part of that has been just a slow vaccination response, but we're getting there. But in British Columbia, again, people who break the health rules by holding parties that lead to death from a COVID-19 infection can now be held responsible for manslaughter because it falls under the definition. It's basically
Makes sense.
Yeah, exactly, right? It is manslaughter charges stem from an unlawful act that causes death and a foreseeable activity that could cause bodily harm. So having a mass gathering and flouting the COVID-19 restrictions 100% falls under that category. So I really wanted to pitch this to the crew because I know we had done a story about a guy in New Jersey about a year ago who was doing the same thing, and he'd gotten some pretty hefty fines. So now with manslaughter being brought into the mix, do you feel that the manslaughter charge fits the crime of just these illegal gatherings?
Yeah, I can jump in here actually. So, I mean, I actually have felt like it should be considered manslaughter. Because it's like anything else. Manslaughter is if you indirectly cause the death of someone, right? That's what manslaughter basically means. You indirectly cause the death of someone else, even if it wasn't intentional. Um, but I think it should be considered manslaughter, at least because if someone, I saw some videos where I saw one video where a guy was going through a grocery store and he was unmasked. I guess because I went down south for a short vacation and they allowed people to be unmasked in the store. But anyway, there was a video of a guy. He was touching his face, touching his nose.
Oh, I shared that with you guys.
Right.
And yeah, touching himself in the face and then grabbing all the food items.
Putting it all over the food item, right? Now, if someone goes into that grocery store, catches COVID, and dies, why shouldn't he be held responsible? Even if we don't know for sure that it came from him. You know? Even if we don't know, he clearly was doing something intentional to harm others. That was his purpose. It was the only purpose he had. I mean, to be an asshole and hurt people in some way. So yeah, should he be held accountable? Absolutely. People like him should be absolutely held. Lizzie, you want to go?
I feel.
Gianni?
Oh, sorry.
Hi, John.
I was just gonna say I agree that if you indirectly kill somebody, then yeah, you should face the consequences. The reason I'm kind of like biased is because if say it is a big party, there's a large grouping of people. Who do you? Yeah, you can say the host of the party is the reason, but really technically everyone there is kind of at fault for like being there. So it's hard to that's going to be hard to like hold up in court. And then also I don't know, but I do agree. I feel like if you're causing if you're unintentionally intentionally causing harm, then and it leads to somebody dying, then yeah. But I don't know. I don't see how that would hold up. I don't know.
And I agree with what you're saying, Johnny. The host is the person who's ultimately responsible because they're throwing the event. So that's where the manslaughter charges would stick on that person. Everybody else who's attended these gatherings are absolutely eligible for the fines that they can get for this. So this this was really brought about from a gentleman who had a gathering, had 78 people in just in his penthouse. That was about 165 square meters. So that would be, I don't know, 600 square feet roughly. So you just had people crammed into a small space. And you're right, Johnny. Everyone else that's there was foolish enough to put their own lives and their grandmother's health at risk. So yeah, you give them the big
Yeah,
fines, but the
absolutely.
manslaughter charge is for the organizer.
And that's why I think in this specific situation, we're talking about manslaughter charges for someone who hosts a COVID-19 party. I think that's too severe because you're dealing with people who are in agreement, who are willing participants to this action. They wouldn't die if they didn't willingly attend the party. So if you're going to charge the host, then you're going to have to charge some of the people who are there as well. Because one, we don't know if the host is the carrier. Who's the carrier? It's the
It would have to be
carrier who keeps the
investigated.
party.
Yeah.
But isn't he
It's the
still
carrier.
indirectly responsible for the death of others by
But,
hosting a
but so,
party
is, so
without?
is the carrier. But
Yeah,
so is the
I'm
carrier
just
who
saying.
Mhm.
walked into the door knowing that they had COVID, but also everyone else who is culpable. And it's just like, I want to get COVID. That's the whole point of a COVID party is
Yeah.
everyone wants to get COVID.
And these aren't COVID parties. These are gatherings. They're illegal gatherings. They're people wanting to get together and party because
I'm
the
just calling it.
provinces have told them and said you can't party. These aren't COVID parties for the sake of getting sick. We're just calling them COVID parties because they're illegal gatherings during the COVID restrictions.
We'll see. And so then that wasn't clear because there have been COVID parties
Yes,
here in the
absolutely, there
States. I'm
have.
not sure in Canada, but clear in, but still, I mean, if we are in the middle of a pandemic, and everyone, all of the restrictions, the government, the CDC, everyone's telling you, to use precaution, to quarantine, to socially distance, and you decide to give that the finger and walk into a party where no one is wearing masks, where no one is socially distancing properly, then I don't feel sorry for you. I don't, if you get it. That's on
Mhm.
you. The onus is on you. The responsibility is on you to take care of yourself.
That's fair.
And
I mean, that's
the
fair. I
host
mean, you're saying that making a choice to go to a gathering like this is in itself
Yeah,
a responsibility.
and the host wouldn't be having a party if people didn't come.
It's tough. I
That's
mean,
like,
okay, your argument makes sense for sure. Your argument definitely makes sense
blame them
that
all.
if I choose to go out to a COVID party, why would the host be held responsible for whatever happens to me? I should be held responsible for whatever happens to me if I chose to be in that situation. That's
Because
Stiffer
then,
penalties for the person who is
maybe
providing the
yeah.
venue. That's absolutely,
but
I
also,
think that's absolutely in accordance with the law because if it wasn't for that organizer, the event wouldn't happen. So stiffer penalties absolutely apply to that individual.
but then also too, it's going to open it up to people who have not necessarily violating the rules, okay, but someone still goes to their establishment. I go to a bar and I get COVID from someone at the bar, even though we were socially distancing, but the bar was open. The bar could have chosen to close until all of this was over.
I see.
But okay, but
Yeah.
this is but your
But
argument,
is
right?
the
In your
bar
argument,
following if the bar is following COVID protocols, then you're right. It's on
And
you.
you
but
You're
wait,
still,
assuming the risk. But if it's an
and you,
illegal gathering,
but also, how do you prove
With
that that
78
person
people.
got COVID from that party? How do you prove that that person
That's
has not
but
been
see,
that's why I
but,
said I
but
COVID?
wait
don't
a
think it
minute.
would
So
hold up
That
in
in
your
person
court.
hasn't been walking into the party. That person doesn't wear a mask, is not socially distancing properly. How do you prove that they got COVID from someone at that party versus someone before they
They would
got
have
to
to
the party?
investigate
I mean, you
everyone.
certainly can't prove it, but putting
Exactly. So then you can't charge anyone with manslaughter.
Okay, but it's in your scenario. If we're taking something that's maybe
Agree.
more obvious in terms of who gave it to whom, like that's like saying that a person who knows they have AIDS and decides to have a relationship with someone else who does not, and for some reason the person who does not chose not to use protection, and so you're in essence saying the person who chose not to use the protection and engage in unprotected sex is
I'm not
responsible.
saying that at all because the situation with AIDS that you're describing is more streamlined. It's more individual.
I'm just talking about who's responsible.
You can
But through
pinpoint
contact tracing.
You can
Through contact
pinpoint.
So what?
tracing.
Yeah, what if you could contact trace back to one single individual at a party?
Well, first of all, in certain states, in certain countries, that individual would be responsible.
Okay.
Not for manslaughter, but they would be responsible. They would be jailed at some point.
I mean, manslaughter might be a bit excessive.
But
I
the
might.
onus is also on me. Like it's 2021. I know not to be raw dogging it with somebody.
You do.
Yeah.
But if you do, but if I'm a person, if I have AIDS and I know I have AIDS, that's intentional. That's an intent that should be held accountable.
I'm not denying
But
that. I'm not denying that. But that situation is way more specific than a COVID.
But I just said, what if you can contact trace back to a single person who goes to a party with COVID, knowing they have COVID? I mean,
then consequences should be dealt.
You still can't tell that person got it from that individual.
That's true. I mean, could have.
No, but you can contact trace to a spread event. You can contact trace back to a bulk event. Absolutely. So if you've got 30 cases that originate from one event, then it's appropriate to hold the organizer responsible because it's on them.
I didn't say not hold them responsible. I said manslaughter. We're talking
manslaughter. I might agree with Liz on manslaughter. It's a little excessive.
I agree someone should be held responsible. I think manslaughter charges.
Maybe fines. Maybe
when you're
some time of jail time.
Participating in their own, I might get it.
Yeah,
I use it all the time. It's not even just AIDS. It's, in situations where pregnancy is on the table. I can't be mad at a dude who I have unprotected sex and then I get pregnant. I'm, in my 40s. I know how not to get pregnant. And so if I get pregnant and I'm not using any type of contraception, it's just as much as my fault as it is his. I know how to prevent this. I'm not stupid.
Okay.
Agreed.
I don't know just as much. I don't know if just as much is an accurate statement because
even more.
if someone knows they have AIDS and are engaging in improper relation or COVID,
if somebody knows and they tell their partner
there should be a higher level of responsibility for that individual. Taking a risk is different than intentionally hurting someone.
It isn't. It's intentionally hurting yourself.
Taking a risk, that's like saying if I take a risk to drive and I get an accident that I'm responsible. I mean, I know every time I go take a drive that I could die.
That's completely different than hopping on a raw penis. That is completely different.
People take risks in multiple different fashions.
You know that.
But there are people who take intentional actions to hurt
community penis out here, and you going out there, and you're not protecting yourself.
That's just a risk. It's a mistake. It's a dumb thing to do. Yes, but it's not an intentional thing. Anyway, all right. Let's get to this comment. We'll just keep going back and forth. All right. So contact tracing is 100%. This is Kevin Thaxton, but has worked in many cases, most cases. AIDS, that AIDS example has been made illegal in several states, by the way. This is where contact tracing comes in, Lizzie. Jacqueline Robinson says. You would be shocked at how many people contract COVID from attending family gatherings.
Nobody been in my house but Mike Winter. I would not be shocked. That's why I quarantined.
All right. Kevin Thaxton says that person invited nasty bastards to what was supposed to be a perfectly safe orgy. Liability of the host. Let's see. Paul Whelan was commenting. he had a question. So should the same be applied to the flu, Robbie?
No, well, if it was a flu strain where people were dying and there were health rules in place and you were told
Rob.
not to restrict, if it was that type of flu, sure. Sure, yes. Has the flu been known to be lethal in some instances? Absolutely. The influenza can kill you, 100%. But this is a pandemic. We don't have an influenza pandemic.
Also, the flu is a bit different in that, and I mean, doctors, people in the medical profession feel, correct me if I'm wrong, but there are people who are with the flu, people are less asymptomatic. Like if you have the flu, you are down for, ain't nobody with the flu going to a party. That's just not
right.
how.
That's true.
You are down. You are out.
You are pretty symptomatic. There are some
Horrible.
asymptomatic.
I'm sorry, say again?
I think there are some asymptomatic or have lesser
but not like
not as common.
COVID. People with COVID think, okay, I'm not feeling any symptoms. I'm just gonna do what I'm gonna do. That's not how the flu works. That's not how it works.
I recall like the Rudy Gobert, before we knew this was going to be a pandemic, Rudy Gobert was giving an interview and he was sick. And he's like, he takes his hands and he puts it all over the microphones and everything like that. And because he was thinking he had the flu or some just cold or something. I mean,
so Rudy Gobert, Neo's talking about a player for the Utah Jazz.
Yeah.
He's lucky that I am not the NBA commissioner because I would have banned him from my league. 100%.
Even if it wasn't COVID, you shouldn't do that.
He just,
I mean,
that part.
But you're putting people at risk.
In general.
Yeah. I mean, and it's an intentional action. All right, let's move on to our next one.
Truth, lies, shenanigans.
All right, Gianni, you want to talk about some millennials. We've got some weird stuff going on with some millennials and their wealth. Is this truth, lies, or shenanigans?
Is for millennials? I don't know. I'm always confused. Who are millennials?
What's the age group?
Millennials. Yeah, millennials. There's two types of millennials: the older millennials and the younger ones. The older ones are the ones born in the 80s. And the
I believe it's
the
80s through early 90s.
1981 to 1996. So if you're born between 81 and 96, you'd be considered a millennial.
That's still ain't Gianni. Still really young. That still ain't Gianni. She's still really young.
We don't have a millennial on the panel. We got to get a millennial.
So an article studied data collected from the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finance. Researchers focus on older millennials, like we just discussed, people who were born in the 1980s. They found that the typical millennial household was 40% behind what previous generations had in wealth at that same age at that time. So although many millennials made dramatic progress in 2016, it was found that Black millennials have had it worst of all. So they're just falling further and further behind when it comes to white millennials in building wealth for So the Black generations haven't amassed wealth even compared to their Black generations before them. And despite progress in politics and culture, most Black Americans have yet to see any wealth gain. The typical white millennial family has about $88,000 in wealth, and the typical Black millennial family has about $5,000 in wealth. So the potential factors for the difference in white and Black millennial wealth, researchers found that first, white millennials are more likely to have parents that have wealth or their benefits from their like wealthy parents. So about 80% of Black millennials with at least a bachelor's degree still have student loan debt, and compared to their half of their white counterparts. Their parents have more resources as well, and white millennials are also more likely to own assets like stocks and homes. So my question, what are we gonna do about this millennial wealth gap between Black and white Americans?
What are we gonna do? Let's start with Robbie. What do you think?
Well, Wealth and resource distribution hasn't really evolved in tandem with the industrial and the technological revolution, which is a contributing factor, a big contributing factor, in my opinion. Um, its automation has eliminated a lot of work at the lower level, so people without a bachelor's degree are finding that a lot of these jobs are taken up with automation. Um, we need to be moving more towards a common good because capitalism is failing the world, and your story is just another element that demonstrates this. Historically, Caucasian Americans have controlled the wealth in the United States. They've had better financial supports than their African American counterparts. There haven't been roadblocks like Jim Crow in their way. And under that climate, many Caucasian families were able to enrich themselves. And this presents more opportunities for their families, their children, to grow the wealth collectively. Um, and I know through conversations with my co host that this is something that needs to be changed in African American culture, just to be talking about your wealth, building wealth, the importance of building that credit. But when you're competing for those jobs initially, there's a real challenge there for sure, Johnny. And I know that for myself, I was fortunate enough that my parents worked hard and invested. And when it came time for me, as soon as I got my first job, they're like, hey, you need to take out a bank loan. You need to start building your credit, your wealth immediately. Um, so, I mean, I was fortunate enough to get those lessons early on. There's a lot that needs to change with modern capitalism because it's a failing endeavor. It really, really is.
I agree with you.
Yeah. My thoughts. It's as Robbie was saying. Black families don't teach their children about wealth in general. Businesses, buying houses, real estate, uh, life insurance. Life insurance is one of the biggest ways that um, families can pass on wealth. But I remember I sold life insurance for a very short period in my life, and I learned a ton though about wealth, money management, and I mean that's what I got out of that. I mean, I would go to talk to a black family, and black families were scared to talk about life insurance because we're talking about death, right? What's going to happen when you die? You know, whereas you go into a white family home or sit down with a white family and they get it. It's like, boom, yes, I need life insurance because I want my children to be taken care of. I want, it's not about the fact that I'm dying. It's about the fact that I'm taking care of my children. And the mindset is so different. I mean, and this is from experience. This isn't something I'm talking about from outside looking in or anything like that. This is from experience. This is what I experienced. And but it's just because those are not the conversations black families tend to have. You know, many white families will like Rabi set up you know, college funds for their kids. They'll set up, of course, life insurance. They'll talk about it at the dinner table. These are important conversations that we never had. But in addition to that, our parents never had it either. Those conversations. So, those conversations never happened to them, so they don't even know to have those conversations. They would half the time they didn't even know what to say. I mean, fortunately, I know what to say to my kids. I have kids, but you know, and I still I don't know everything. So I don't know enough. You know, I don't know enough. I'm not wealthy by any stretch of the imagination, and in addition to that, a lot of this is residual from being held back from slavery and things like that.
Exactly. That's
Right.
where it's
So yeah.
that's where it starts. And I feel like I understand the point of these conversations, the point of these statistics, but America doesn't acknowledge how ridiculous the notion is that Black folks are just going to catch up
Yep.
in a decade, in 2 decades.
I have
We have, for at least 2 centuries, but beyond that, but at least 2 centuries, dealt with a government that was complicit in subjugating us and keeping us down. I'm talking about redlining. I'm talking about lack of access to education. I'm talking about banks that wouldn't, allow us to have accounts, wouldn't allow us to have loans. So no, parents weren't talking about wealth, residual wealth, ownership, because they weren't allowed to own. Like if you could rent a property, you were good. You were fortunate. And so yeah, my parents owned our home. My dad's mother owned the home first. And when she, right before she passed away, she, gave the home to my father. And so he owned the home with my mother. However, my mother got bad advice about the home. My mother took out one of those what is it called? It
API,
now be
those
no, no,
annual.
no. Is it a reverse mortgage? What is it
Oh, a
called?
reverse mortgage. Ooh,
Um, and Jacqueline Robinson, if you're
those could
watching,
work in some situations. I just want to say, but
but
in
that
most,
that
it doesn't.
but with the reverse mortgage, more often than not, the family does not know that the person who took it out took it out. If my sister and if we had known, I would have been like, no, okay, we will give you money to help you take care of you for the day. With a reverse mortgage, the bank owns you. Yeah, they give you money for the cost of your property that you could live off of. But as soon as the person who took the mortgage dies, the property is owned by the bank. And if we want to, the house that I grew up in, if I want to have that property, I have the balance of the mortgage right away that day. There are no payments. You can't make payments. You have to pay 500,000, 600. Like it's crazy, but it's attractive to a lot of older people
Mm-hmm.
who feel like they don't
Because
want
they
to
need
go to,
income. They need to
they need
survive.
income, and they don't want to feel like they are dependent on their families.
Yeah.
But a lot of these conversations that aren't had in the Black community are because of, and when I say ignorance, I don't mean it in a negative way. I mean it in that we weren't taught, because we were never taught about ownership.
Right.
We were never given the opportunity to think that we could own something. It was always, let me pay the white man to rent a little piece of his property. And so
Not
we're
only
catching
that, discriminatory practices in lending as well.
like redlining is still going on.
Yep,
Redlining
it
is
is.
still going, it's called something different now. It's usually, you see it now when Black homeowners are trying to sell their property, and they are being, um, when their property becomes appraised, if you will, the appraisals are downsized
Mm-hmm.
because they are Black. But it's not a fair game. And so all of these things come into this particular issue about millennials not having the same amount of generational wealth, if you will, the same amount of
It's to
good
be
credit.
expected, really.
It's because everyone expects us to, play catch up as a people, as a community in like 20 years. Okay, you free. You supposed to, get yourself together. Well, how long did it take you to subjugate us?
Yep.
We
And the
talking
good thing
hundreds
is,
of
I mean, the positive is there are improvements, right? But it's not surprising. Millennials have been taking advantage of the ability their parents' ability to make money as well. So it's just the advantages are overwhelming, um, and I'm not surprised by it. But Gianni, I wanted to give you a minute or two, well, a few, at least a minute to kind of share your thoughts.
I feel, given the numbers, given the statistics, obviously we're not surprised. We know why we know all the factors that contribute to it. I feel like Liz said, you guys they're so concerned with providing us these numbers, but there's no solution. Like, are we going to, because there was such a disadvantage to us, well, really oppression completely, to Black people or minority groups, are there going to be, like, is there going to be some type of advantage? I'm not talking like reparations, I think they're called. I'm not talking that, but just where is the advantage for us to catch up? It's not like a cry for help, but it's just kind of like, I don't know.
I mean, they tried with
What is
affirmative
the assistance
action, but I don't
doing?
think affirmative action was really enough.
Well, also, and
Yeah.
Gianni mentioned reparations. I mean, I don't think that there are going to be any reparations that I see in my
It doesn't make
lifetime.
sense at this.
But as
Yeah.
as I look at my own personal situation, like, did we talk about, financial growth, financial responsibility in our house a lot? Not as it related to real estate and property. However, my parents were very strict about spending, about being frivolous with money, and I just didn't listen. Like my current financial situation, whereas, I'm glamorous in, the possessions that I own, possession minus property. Like, if you saw my closet, you would think I was like a Kardashian or J Lo or something like that.
Mhm.
However, that's on me. That's not really on my parents. I often get asked, because my dad died right after, like right before we graduated high school, and I was very close with my dad. And so I often get asked, would your dad be proud of you if he saw you? And I'm like, yeah, he would be proud about a lot of things. But the first thing that would come out of his mouth, if he were to see my closet, if he were to see my possessions, I would get a full lecture, because he would just be like, you have all of this stuff, but you don't have any stuff.
Mm.
And that's on you.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
there are a lot of us that don't pay attention to it, because we see,
True.
we grew up seeing what everyone else had on the outside and
Yeah.
wanting to get some of that. So
Yeah.
it's a lot. It's a lot that goes into this topic.
It
It's a
is.
lot that goes into
It
this
is.
topic.
Good choice of topic. So, like when it says, this
Very
depends
good.
on one's economic background as well. My grandmother wouldn't stop talking about this kind of stuff, but as a whole race of people, black people were prevented not just by Jim Crow. Look up the New Deal. Jim Crow
Mm,
aside, USA through the Federal Housing Administration (HUD) had approximately 35 years of overt deed restrictions that disallowed sales to black people. And redlining is still a thing. It worked in the 90s. It was I was 20 years
yep.
old then, and it's still a thing.
Yep.
And Jacqueline Rob said, let's talk about those restrictive covenants that still exist in some of those deeds, particularly in high income neighborhoods. Yeah, so I
Mm,
mean, the
for sure.
community's been disadvantaged for years, in addition to the lack of knowledge. I mean, when you can, but I still think knowledge is the key, because as what you don't know, people can take advantage of it and get over on you. The less you
Knowledge
know,
is definitely the key. Definitely the key. But I think for our parents, it wasn't just lack of knowledge. They were working on survival. Like they
hmm
were trying to
It was a
survive.
different.
yeah.
Yeah. It was a
Yeah.
different thing.
It was, yeah,
True.
it was, I think the knowledge thing would trickle down to our generation, Neo, where, okay, I had this knowledge and I chose to, rebuff it. I
I
chose
mean,
to not pay attention to it.
let me give you. So my first car was a Ford Escort, right? And I had no knowledge of like interest rates and you know payments. I just know, okay, this is what I can afford. This is what I can pay. I had no knowledge of like how it worked. They got over on me big time. I mean, my payments were like super high, and my interest rate was, I think my interest rate was like 11, 12%, some ridiculous amount. And, eventually the car got repossessed. Um, and that was, and that stayed on my credit for years. And I didn't even know how significant an issue that being on my credit would be. I was just
Yep.
like, I can't pay the car. And then so for years, I paid for it, trying to improve my credit, right? Just because of this lack of knowledge. And I mean, it was just had came down to a lack of knowledge and understanding of these things. Once I understood these things, I'm like, oh my God, if I had known.
But Neo, so I'll give you another quick scenario. So I've never in my life had a driver's license. Everyone that's close to me knows I don't have a driver's license. I've driven without a driver's license, but I've never owned a
Me
car.
too.
I've driven across the country without a car. I've driven from Colorado to DC with Corbin Ruth, Mullenix, Goldstein without a car, right? But the reason why I don't have a driver's license is because not because we didn't have cars in our house. My dad always had a car. By the time I was 14, my sister had a car. So I grew up in a house with two cars. But my thinking, my possessive, kind of conceited thinking, if you will. I told my parents on my 16th birthday, I'm not getting my license if I don't have a car in the driveway. No, no car of my own in the driveway. And I didn't want a used car. I wanted a new car. And I think my dad was just like, okay, I'm just going to throw her to the wolves. Like, I could do nothing else with her. That was just me being spoiled and believing that I was owed something. And so from there,
And that's a common thought
yeah,
in the community as
exactly.
well.
I've always felt like I've been owed something.
It's a
And so
common.
fortunately for me, all of my friends have always had amazing cars and have been willing to drive me wherever. Now we have Uber, so
Chauffeurs.
I can, I've never had a license, ever, ever. And I probably will never get one.
My brother's the same way. He
You
won't
don't
do it
need
either.
it.
Really?
All right, that was actually a
Like,
really good hot topic. That was great discussion, guys. Great discussion. Thank you, Johnny.
Truth, lies, shenanigans.
All right, last one's me. I'm talking about them. I'm gonna make this quick, but I'm talking about these idiot Republicans, and this is straight up shenanigans. So one of Joe Biden's initiative to help bridge the gap that we've been talking about, created with the years of racism and the wounds reopened with the slew of crimes against Black people recently, is to teach Black history in schools. It's like a good concept, right? But a group of Republicans decided to send Biden a letter requesting him to withdraw his proposal to teach Black history and make it part of the curriculum. And they called it divisive. They said it was divisive. So, my simple question to you is, do you think teaching Black history is divisive? Well, I can't say the words, but I think
wah, wah, wah.
I know where most of you guys stand. But if you don't mind trying to play devil's advocate, uh, are you able to make a cogent reason as to why it could be divisive? And then, contrary to that, I want to know the truth, about why it's important to
The
teach
truth.
this. But let's start.
Who you asking? Who you
Let me
asking?
start with Lizzie first. Let me start with Lizzie.
Again,
Sorry.
I'm a professor at an HBCU, at a historically Black college/university. Why would I think this is divisive? Why would I think teaching American history, which includes Black people, which includes African Americans, why would I think that's divisive? One of the things that makes me so sad is when I introduce a person or a piece of history to my predominantly Black students and they have no idea who I'm talking about. Do you know how many people at the beginning of the semester, right before Black History Month in February, how many of my students had never heard of Carter G. Woodson? Do
Wow.
you know how that makes me sad?
At
And
Howard?
so to have at
I
Howard,
know.
but they're freshmen at Howard, so they're
Bill.
coming in
Okay.
Howard. No, but
Oh,
they're
from other
coming in
schools. I got you.
Howard from
From other
other
places,
schools,
yeah.
not being educated.
From across the
And
nation.
so to have people, members of government, who are sitting here and trying to say, no, first of all, y'all barely teach Black history as it is.
Right.
It's not a priority. It's a blip on the syllabus. It's a blip in a history book. And so for these people to want to come down from the blip and make it just a mention, again, that goes to the previous topic in conversation about financial responsibility. We are slowly being erased again from the conversation. And so, no, I think this is bullshit. And I want Biden. Biden should call me again as a professor at an HBCU. Call me to testify before the panel. I got something for your ass.
Bet you
I
do.
got
I'd
something
love
for
to
you.
see that.
That
Robbie?
would be great. That would be epic.
Yeah, first thing that came to mind was careful. Your white guilt is showing. It's
White guilt.
yeah. Well, I mean, don't teach it because it's cringy. It makes us feel like
It's
somebody
cringy.
did something wrong. Absolutely, right? Um, but for me, I had to stop and think about the Canadian experience because we had a lot of shenanigans historically with our Indigenous populations, with the with First Nations people. And it wasn't until the last decade that Canada has opted to teach in schools about residential schools. Um, for those of you who don't know, the residential school system was a network of boarding schools for Indigenous peoples. It was funded by the Canadian government and administered by Christian churches. And really, the long game was to just assimilate these people. Um, that was information that I wasn't provided with as a child in the school system. If
Mhm.
I didn't even hear about this stuff anecdotally until my 30s. So shame. So
Wow.
it, and then learning about it has forced me to reframe a lot of bad ideas that were thrown my way throughout my entire adult life. So through education, you gain understanding. You create a common point from which to build. Because if I don't
Yep.
understand
Yep.
someone's struggle historically, how am I going to understand their struggle today?
Yep.
And it's only through education
Right.
that you are going to achieve that.
Mhm.
So, I mean,
Very well.
Good. You took
it,
one of my points. Good job, Ryan. Stole
that
it.
doesn't happen often. I'll take it.
Gianni, do you have
It's
some thoughts?
true. It's very well said. Um, I 100% don't think that it's divisive. I go to an HBCU, like Liz said. Like I would never say that our history, the people that are here, learning about that and our struggles or lack of struggle, whatever, learning about the history. I don't think that's divisive. But to play devil's advocate, even playing devil's advocate, it's hard to find a good point. I think the only thing that I could find and think of is it reminded me of this quote that Morgan Freeman, I think it was Morgan Freeman said something like, "The way to stop racism is to stop talking about it." And I always was like,
He said something
I've
similar
always
to
heard
that.
the opposite.
I know what you're talking
Yeah.
about. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I feel like maybe that is the angle that a good Republican, I don't know, I'm kidding. Maybe that's the angle that they are coming from sometimes when it comes to teaching about Black history. But they always want their hands in something. Like they always want to control something. Like, no, just let us teach the history that we know to be true. Maybe they're afraid that there's more demons that might come out. I don't know. So
Yeah, that was a
I
60
don't know.
Minutes
I think
interview,
that
by the way. You're right.
This
And
is
I
a
disagreed
prime.
yeah,
with him wholeheartedly.
Oh,
yeah, I was
I've
confused by that.
disagreed with Morgan Freeman on several things.
Many things.
And I'm going to call him out on his relationship with his now deceased step granddaughter. We're not going to go there. But
Strange.
one of the examples of not having um, a diverse history program in this country, former Pennsylvania Senator Rick Santorum last week, in talking about Native Americans, talked about how the beginning of the United States of America began on a blank slate, that the settlers came over to America. America was nothing.
Rick Santorum.
And these were his words. America was nothing. And they saved us. They created this country. They created all. And it's just like, bruh. And of course, people are, he's now a commentator. He works for CNN now. He's no longer a senator. He works for CNN now. And everyone's calling for CNN to fire him. Not the first time that he says some bullshit. But it's just like, have you not looked at American history? So you are saying that, the people that came over, the white folks that came over from Europe, that were imperialist, that basically wiped out the Native American population that were already civilized and living here, that this country was nothing before you all got here? That's what you're saying? That's what he
That's what
said.
he was saying.
That's
And
what
so
he's
that's
saying.
the problem with not having a true testament of what American history is about. To
Yep.
say, American history
Because
is
that's what they're
only
learning.
whitewashed.
Mhm.
Yep.
That's
Like we're
exactly what they're
only
learning in their schools.
exactly
Yep.
that we're only here because of white, inventors, because of white, thinkers and people who, wanted to be progressive. That's the problem. That's what we deal with, and that's where a lot of racism comes from.
Yeah.
The
Yep.
idea
Yes.
that the rest of us, were just on the side sweeping the floor, that we had no contribution whatsoever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've always been very critical of Rick Santorum.
So she was putting her middle finger up for those on our podcast. I mean, to Morgan Freeman's point, um, the more ignorant you are of certain situations, the more you kind of can accept things. But um, I do like to play devil's advocate from time to time, and I did try to play devil's advocate with this, and I, like you, Gianni, struggled. But the only reason I could see teaching Black history in schools could be divisive is because it could divide their family. We've already seen it already with like the Trump
Mhm.
era, more progressive children standing up to their racist parents, right? And so
Yeah.
if children in their racist families were to grow up learning the truth instead of being spoon fed this racist nonsense, they would learn to be more tolerant, just like Robbie was stating.
True.
Yeah.
That's
They
interesting.
would learn to see like the foolishness of their parents and the people in their communities. What they're teaching them is just bullshit.
Yeah.
You know?
They'll look at them like an enemy.
The truth of history is not saying that white people aren't relevant, that white people haven't
No,
contributed to our
certainly not.
society. That's
Yeah.
not saying at
Absolutely
all.
not.
But see, that's what
Yeah.
scares
At all.
Republicans, right? They won't be able to lie anymore. They won't be able to maintain this sense of superiority they have. And that scares them.
Right.
So, of course, they don't
Right.
want Black history taught in schools. You know, why would they? Because the children learn they're liars.
I mean, y'all may be able to do that, in what I'm going to call now the 50 states, although DC is about to become the 51st. Don't get it twisted. However, in Washington, DC, like, you can't tell me, that Black history should not be a part of the
No
curriculum.
way.
For you to
Right.
be the president of the United States, the former president of the United States, and sit in the White House on Pennsylvania Avenue and have the nerve to say, it's too much. It's ridiculous.
Just like Jacqueline
It's
Robinson
ridiculous.
said, Black history is American history. And
It's
vice
Yes, it
American
is.
I mean,
history.
because
It's American history.
America would not be one of the wealthiest countries in the world had it not
Listen,
been for slavery.
listen. Read
100.
Ralph Ellison say, What America Will Be Without Blacks. Read Ralph Ellison, y'all.
I mean,
Ralph
You'll get a
Ellison.
full picture. You will get a
There-
full picture.
there's a
I
TikTok I
said,
posted on our TLS page where it's Chelsea Handler doing an interview with down in this Tallahassee, Alabama, and she was just interviewing people on the street, and they were just so ignorant, talking about the slaves were treated well. There was maybe just one person.
slaves. What slaves were treated
It was
well?
like
Let me
maybe,
know.
they were saying there was maybe one slave owner that treated their slaves bad, and the rest of them treated them like family. I was like, what the?
Anymore.
I was just, but it's crazy. It's absolutely.
More
Go on the
reason why we
TikTok
need
page.
to
It's like,
truth about history.
I'd
If
be
y'all think that slavery was a good thing, that we were just living high, living large on slavery. Come on now. Really? Really?
kind of.
Really?
All right,
no.
let me get to these comments
Shameful.
online real quick.
Oh.
We got Ty Dion. What's the vice is not to teach Black history? They should teach Black history. Everyone needs to know what's happened, how it happened, and why it happened. Education is not a shaming mechanism. It's a way to build empathy, compassion, and help provide space to create new, stronger, and better foundations to work from together as a human race. They need to do the same with all groups of individuals that suffered at the hands of the white discriminatory patriarchy. That started here in Canada with Indigenous peoples here in Canada. But there's a long way to go. Long way to go. And I agree. I mean, just like you said with Rick Santorum stating that this was a blank slate. I mean, come on. Where is this?
That's
And people
ignorance.
believe him.
Yeah,
This.
my dad actually had a comment. So no learning is not bad. Um, okay. And a few Black students at Lewis and Clark College, where he went to school, had to demonstrate Black history. He said he only had 20 Black students in his school. We had to be added. We were We were also, they demanded a black professor. And okay, sorry, it's hard to read it. I think he's on his phone. All right. Kevin Thaxton said there would be a need for Black history if Black folks weren't brought here. Would there be a need if Black folks weren't brought here? Sure, if Black folks weren't brought here, I'm telling you, America would not be what it is. Not be what it is.
This would be a different country.
All right. That's it for Hot Topic. Good stuff, guys.
Truth, lies, shenanigans.
All right, let's get into our game show. All right, so this month is Asian and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So we're going to start out the month testing you all's knowledge with some shenanigans trivia. This is Asian and Pacific Islander edition. Quiz is from factmonster.com. So TLS is not responsible for the accuracy of this quiz because I don't know how accurate it is.
You got a disclaimer out there. You got to put that
That's a good disclaimer.
I think this is about to be some shenanigans, y'all.
So I don't know if I didn't go through it, so I don't know how accurate it is. We're going to find out, and we're going to test it out. All right. So I'll go around and ask.
Responsible for the spelling and grammar.
And I'm not responsible for that either. All right. So I'll go around, I'll ask the question, and you'll have 15 seconds to answer. If you get it right, you get a point. The person with the most points wins, and that person gets our final thought of the week. So I'm going to start, let me see, I'll start out counterclockwise. Let's go with Gianni Storm. You ready, Gianni?
Yes.
Right, question number 1. When did Chinese, it should say Chinese American workers, begin to build the Transcontinental Railroad?
That should be your first indication.
That's why I put my disclaimer. All right. Workers begin to build the Transcontinental. Was it 1865, 1900, or 1950? What do you think?
1900.
1900. Let's see. That is incorrect. Incorrect. Correct answer is 1865. The Central Pacific Railroad recruited Chinese American workers to work on the Transcontinental Railroad in 1865. All right. Next question, B. What island was nicknamed Ellis Island of the West because it was a major immigrant processing station in the early part of the 20th century? Was it Goat Island, Angel Island, or Alcatraz Island?
I'm going to go with Goat Island.
Goat Island. That is incorrect. Incorrect. All right. Angel Island is the correct answer. Angel Island processed mainly Asian immigrants from 1910 to 1940. Goat Island is now called the Yerba Bueno Island and houses a lighthouse and naval training station. Alcatraz was a notorious prison. All right. Liz E. In 1976, whose work incorporated Asian American history, myth, and memories of the author's family? Was it Pearl S. Buck in The Good Mother, Maxine Hong Kingston, Woman Warrior, or Amy Tan in The Joy Luck Club?
I'm going to go with Maxine Hong Kingston.
That is correct. Correct. Correct.
It definitely wasn't Amy Tan in the Joy Luck Club.
I was going to say, that's a little soon, right? The publication of Kingston's family memoir was notable for its mainstream success and was awarded the National Book Award in 1976. All right, Yanni, round 2. See if you can catch up to Lizzie. What was the purpose of the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882?
See, this is why we need history, y'all. This is why we need history.
Chinese Exclusion Act. This is a significant historical act. All right. So to increase taxation of the wages of Chinese labor, to prohibit the immigration of Chinese laborers to the U.S., or to establish greater trade controls with China.
Ooh. What was the second one? Sorry.
So
What did you say?
the
The
purpose
second
of the
one was?
Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 to increase taxation of the wages on Chinese laborers, to prohibit the immigration of Chinese laborers in the U.S., or to establish greater trade controls with China.
I think it's B.
B?
Mhm.
That is correct. Correct. Yes. Yes. All right. Before 1882, anti Chinese sentiment had increased and riots occurred in San Francisco due to the quantity of cheap Chinese labor. The Chinese Exclusion Act banned immigration of Chinese laborers for 10 years. Subsequent laws expanded this power and were finally repealed with the new immigration laws in 1943, a few years ago.
Mm.
All right, Robbie. All right, your chance to catch up to. All right, what's a picture bride? Picture bride. Is it an Asian woman who agrees to an arranged marriage through an exchange of photographs, a traditional ceremony in which the bride is prepared for her wedding day, or any woman of Asian descent who marries interracially? Picture bride.
I'm going to use word
Never heard.
association and pick number one once again.
Dang, I would have picked that.
Same. I would have said that too.
That is correct. Correct. All right, picture brides,
Hey.
still common today, often did not see their new husbands until their arrival in the United States. More than 20,000 picture brides came to Hawaii between 1907 and 1924, primarily from Japan and Korea.
Oh, wow.
All right.
That's incredibly a lot of people. Wow.
All right. Lizzie, this might
Great.
give you the win. Let's see. Who were the pensionados? Pensionados.
They wanted their pensions. They wanted their pensions.
Let's see. Japanese American veterans from World War II who lobbied Congress for pension plans. Filipino students who came to the U.S. to study medicine, agriculture, and other fields from 1903 to 1910. Or Asian American students who started the Yellow Power movement in the 1970s. Pensionado.
I'm gonna say B.
Oh, you're going with B. I was thinking one seemed too obvious.
Like it's very obvious. It might be right.
That is correct. And you win the
Hey.
game. All right. The pensionados came to the U.S. under the aegis of the U.S. government. Most of these Filipino students returned to the Philippines and made significant contributions to agriculture, business, education, medicine, and government. Good job, Lizzie.
Notice though, this is a lot of American history.
I couldn't hear you. What'd you say, Lizzie?
Just notice that this is a lot of Asian American history that the average U.S. citizen does not know about.
Very
And yet
true.
your government, your politician, they want to like streamline and say, no more diverse history. We just gonna keep it whitewashed.
Mm-hmm.
We just gonna keep it
Yep.
whitewashed.
Yep.
That's exactly
All right.
what it
Let's get into our shout out so we can close it out. All right, let's go clockwise this time. Lizzie, shout out.
Shout out to my sister, Jacqueline Robinson, who is now fully vaccinated. I have not seen both of us. We now live in the same city in Washington, D.C. I have not seen Jacqueline Robinson in over a year because of the pandemic. So shout out to her. I'm fully vaccinated. She's fully vaccinated. So hopefully we about to get it done, about to get it in.
All right, shout outs, Robbie.
Very special shout out to my cousin Mark, his wife Lori, and their son Alex. They lost their son Eric very suddenly this week, unfortunately. So very special shout out to family. Just tons of love and support. I wish we could get together and hug it out and cry at a funeral, but it's not in the cards during COVID. So I will plant that tree for Eric.
All right, Johnny Storm.
Shout out to Olivia E. I can't wait to start this new schedule with you on Wednesday. And thank you for just being a good friend and for conversing with me. And our relationship has grown over this time. So shout out to you.
That's awesome. I'm happy to see that relationship grow as well. All right, my shout out today is to all of my TikTokers out there. I've been doing a series on racist songs you didn't know were racist, and they've been blowing up. I've gotten over 12,000 followers in just like a couple of weeks. So I want to thank my TikTokers out there for all the support. If you haven't already, find me at Neo, N-I-O, _ Nyx, N-Y-X, Neo Nyx. All right. And we have a shout out. We have to do our pet of the week. Our pet of the week goes to, I don't have the pet of the week, unfortunately. But you can go to our pet of the week page, Pet Shenanigans page, group page, and you'll see Remy, beautiful Lizzie's cat.
My boo-boo baby, my boo-boo baby. This pet of the week was my Remy cat, admiring himself in all of his Chanel glory.
Maybe we'll get lucky and I can pull it in before we close it out. So we'll see. All right. Thank you very much. All right. So that is all the time we have. Make sure you check out our TLS Pet Shenanigans page so you can post your pics and videos of your favorite furry or not so furry friend. And of course, group pics. I mean, the winner gets a shout out here on the show. And hey, if you want to shout out yourself, make sure you go to our social media pages and one of us will shout you out from time to time. All right, and I'd like to thank you for joining us. We hope that you maybe learned something, gained a new perspective, you can get some things off your chest. Please don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and share at TLS Live Show. Tomorrow, check out the YouTube page for your favorite moments and clips, TLSshow.com. Our next live show is on Sunday, May 9th, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. That is Mother's Day. So we will still see you there, 4 p.m. Yep, Mother's Day. I've been reminded. Don't forget. Don't forget this Wednesday, Johnny Storm and Olivia E will be holding it down with you Wednesday nights on TLS Unscripted. And our final thought for the day, winner is Miss Liz E. What's the final thought, Liz? Close us out.
Final thought, very quick. The Wizards are trying to get into the playoffs, y'all. The Washington Wizards are trying to get into the playoffs,
right?
y'all. So yeah, DC Rising, watch a Wizards game. Send them some tweets, send them some love. We deserve it. We love it. It would be our third championship since 2018. Come on, y'all. We can do this.
Yeah, we can do it. We can get in there. We can get in there. Oh, and I was able to pull up Remy. Let's take a look at it. Let's take a look at it real quick. That's Remy cat.
Look at that. That's my baby, y'all. That's my baby. Admiring his Chanel self, his king self.
All right.
Damn, I am a sexy beast.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. All right. Thanks, Gianni. Thanks, Rob B. Thanks, Lizzie, and our people behind the scenes, Miss Jose, Olivia E. Most importantly, I want to thank you for joining us. We will see you all next time.
Oh, yeah.